I always thought monsters were horrendous creatures, deformed, easy to recognize. But no. They wear expensive suits, smile for the cameras, and shake hands firmly. I learned that the hard way. Brandon made me believe I was special. When we started dating, he was attentive, protective, almost perfect. Little comments would pop up now and then, but I ignored them. "You don't need those friends, babe. They're a bad influence on you." I laughed, thinking it was just concern. "That dress is a bit much, don't you think?" "I prefer when you dress more elegantly." It sounded like a compliment, until I realized it was poison disguised as kindness. Today, I sit on the edge of the bed, looking at my reflection in the mirror, wondering when I lost myself. The house is spotless, every object in its place, because if it's not, Brandon will complain. "Looks like you don't do anything all day." He says it with an impatient voice, his eyes analyzing me like I'm a burden. If I respond, I'm dramatic. If I stay silent, I'm cold. Either way, I'm wrong. At first, he only belittled me subtly. "Wow, Emily, you used to be smarter. Are you getting distracted?" Then came the mind games. The keys I was sure I left on the table would disappear, only to show up in absurd places. "You keep forgetting everything. Maybe you need a doctor." My phone would vanish and reappear inside the fridge. "Are you losing your mind?" He would laugh, but his eyes said something else. He wanted me to doubt myself. And he succeeded. He would say something, make promises, and later swear we never had that conversation. He completely changed the facts, twisted our talks, and made me question my own memory. Slowly, I started doubting myself, feeling like my mind was crumbling. Over time, my friends disappeared. My family began to drift away because he always found a way to turn any gathering into an unbearable event. "They don't like you, Emily. You're trying too hard." Eventually, even I started pulling away. It was easier than trying to explain what was happening. Today, he comes home from work and throws his blazer over the chair. "Is dinner ready, or did you spend the whole day lying around complaining about life?" My stomach turns, but I get up. I serve the food in silence. "You used to be more interesting. Now all you do is complain," he says, chewing without even looking at me. "No wonder your friends disappeared. Who would want to be around someone so ungrateful?" I close my eyes, take a deep breath. I want to scream. I want to throw the plate on the floor. But I do nothing, because that's what he wants. He wants me to react so he can say I'm out of control, unstable, that I'm the problem. There are moments when he's a prince, attentive, kind, looking at me like I'm the most important woman in the world, but it never lasts. As soon as he gets what he wants, the spell is broken. In those rare moments, I see the man I fell in love with, and for a brief second, I convince myself he's still there, that maybe marriages are like this, a game of ups and downs. But deep down, I know it's just another illusion keeping me here. I don't know what made me look at Brandon's phone that night. Maybe it was instinct, a gut feeling, or just the accumulation of so many small doubts I had been trying to ignore. What I do know is that when I saw the message on the screen, something inside me shattered. "It was great seeing you today. We need to do this again soon." My stomach turned. The number wasn't saved, but the intimacy in the message was obvious. My heart pounded as I searched through the history. Other messages had been deleted, but that one had slipped through. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline rush through my body. "Brandon, who sent you this message?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. He didn't even glance at the screen. He calmly took the phone from my hand, locked it, and looked at me with a tired smile. "My God, Emily, this paranoia again? You're becoming unbearable, always creating problems where there aren't any." Paranoia. I had heard that word so many times that, for a moment, I wondered if I really was overreacting. But the message was there. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. I just want to understand, Brandon. Who is this person? He rolled his eyes and let out an impatient sigh. She's a coworker, Emily. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to have to explain myself all the time? Don't you trust me? Because if you don't, I don't know what we're still doing together. The threat was between the lines. It was always like this. I was the one in the wrong. I was the one ruining everything. And I believed it. The next day, I was drained. The emotional exhaustion weighed on me like an anchor, and all I wanted was to hear a familiar voice, a reminder that I was still me. I picked up my phone and opened my contact list. But a name was missing. My chest tightened. I tried to remember if I had deleted the contact myself, but deep down I already knew what had happened. Brandon was erasing people from my life, one by one, and I hadn't even noticed when it started. Brandon, where's Beatrice's number? I was going to text her, but I couldn't find it. He smiled, that cold smile that always made me doubt everything. Huh. You yourself said you didn't want to talk to those people. Are you forgetting things again? A chill ran down my spine. He did this all the time. Changed the stories, twisted the facts until I didn't know what was real anymore. And maybe, for the first time, I saw with complete clarity what was happening. He was erasing me. The only person Brandon hadn't managed to push away was Melissa, my childhood friend, my soul sister. She had always known something was wrong, but never pressured me. Instead, she found subtle ways to remind me of who I was before Brandon. The message I received that afternoon was from her. Hey, Em. I know you've been busy, but I wanted to send you this. Take a look when you can. Love you. A link, an online quiz. Are you in a healthy relationship? My fingers hovered over the screen. I almost ignored it. But a part of me, the part that was starting to wake up, clicked. The first question appeared on the screen. Has your partner ever made you doubt your own memory or perception of reality? There were 3 options. The first, never. The second, sometimes, but I think it might be in my head. The third, yes, he often says I remember things wrong or exaggerate. My chest tightened. My mind raced, revisiting every time my words had been dismissed, every argument where Brandon swore I was overreacting. Every night I lay in bed in silence, wondering if the problem was really me. My hands trembled. I selected the third option. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't crazy. Brandon was manipulating me. I kept going through the quiz, and with each new question came a revelation. At the end of the test, the result appeared on the screen. I already had an idea of what it would be, but even so, reading those words made my throat tighten. 95% chance you are in an abusive relationship. The only thing he hadn't done yet was physically hurt me, but the fear that he would was always there. I could see it in his eyes, in the way his grip on my arm grew tighter, in the way his tone suddenly changed. Sometimes I held my breath, waiting for a hit that never came, but the emotional violence had already made me bleed on the inside. My heart pounded. It wasn't an exaggeration. It wasn't just in my head. It was real. And now, I needed to act. Below the result, a piece of advice. If you believe you are in an abusive relationship, seek support. Talk to someone you trust. Research the signs of emotional abuse, and if possible, reach out to a professional or support group. You are not alone. There is a way out. I read those words over and over. I needed to find a way out. I needed to regain my independence, my control, and above all, I needed to survive. I spent the next few hours reading about abusive relationships. Every sentence, every testimony echoed inside me. Women sharing their stories, describing their pain, and every one of them could have been my own words. I wanted to cry, but the anger was stronger. Not at Brandon, but at myself. How did I let this happen? How did I let myself get lost like this? I didn't have the strength to leave, not yet. But now I knew that one day I would, and for that, I needed to prepare. Brandon made me quit my job when we got married. He said it was for my own good, that he could provide everything for me. But now, I saw the truth. He just wanted to strip me of any chance of independence. I no longer had my own bank account, only a joint one with him where every cent was monitored. That gave him total control over me. Cash was rare, but I started saving a little. Small bills hidden in strategic places, like I was collecting breadcrumbs for an escape that still seemed impossible. That night was the beginning. I slid the first few bills between the pages of a book on the shelf. It wasn't much, but it represented something bigger, a flicker of hope, a start. I didn't know when or how, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to escape. Brandon was watching me. I could feel his eyes on me with every movement I made. He didn't say anything, but his gaze analyzed every gesture, every breath. He knew something in me had changed, and that made him suspicious. That day, he got home from work earlier than usual. When I walked into the living room, he was sitting on the couch, spinning his phone between his fingers. His smile was cold, artificial. "You've been different, Emily." His voice was low, almost sweet, but I knew it was a trap. I pressed my fingers against my palms to stop the trembling. "I'm just tired. That's all." He tilted his head, examining every detail of my face. "You know you can tell me anything, right? We're a couple. We shouldn't have secrets." I nodded, keeping my voice neutral. "Of course." But I already had a secret, and I was starting to build a plan to get out of there. The first thing I needed was to regain my financial independence. Brandon couldn't know I was trying to go back to work, so I started looking for online opportunities, carefully deleting my browsing history each time. Melissa was still my only ally. She sent me discreet messages, suggesting contacts, and even offering to hold money for me. You need an escape plan, and you need to be ready for anything. I knew she was right. Every step had to be calculated. Brandon noticed my distance, and it bothered him. His need for control grew stronger. He started keeping track of my outings, showing up unexpectedly in the middle of the day, even changing passwords on devices without telling me. "For your safety, babe. There are so many bad people out there," he said, sliding an arm around my waist. But that wasn't protection. It was an invisible leash. He began testing my loyalty, small provocations, questions that seemed innocent but were traps. Every word I said was analyzed, waiting for me to contradict myself. I had to be careful. Now, more than ever. Brandon had secrets. I had known that for years, but I never had the courage to look. Now, I needed something against him, something that would give me the upper hand. And then, I found it. Going through his laptop while he was in the shower, I spotted a strange document in a folder, a series of bank transfers to an unknown account, large amounts of money, something he didn't want anyone to find out about. I plugged a flash drive into the laptop and copied everything, planning to go through it later. My heart pounded. I didn't know how yet, but now I had a weapon. And this was just the beginning. I was going to get out, and Brandon was going to pay. I knew I needed to leave this relationship, but after everything I had heard and lived through, I realized there could be no hesitation. My escape had to be final. No turning back, no room for regrets or empty promises. One day, I called my mom and told her what I was going to do. I hesitated before dialing. I didn't want to involve them in this, didn't want them to know just how bad things had gotten. At first, my parents adored Brandon, but after the wedding, the warnings started. My mom would ask if I was happy, and my dad, more direct, would say, "Whenever you want, call me, and I'll get you out of that house." Those words echoed in my mind, a way out that was always there. That was my plan B. But plan A was already in motion. Saving money, mapping out an escape route, and somehow exposing who Brandon really was. A few days later, everything fell apart. Brandon came home angrier than usual. The smell of alcohol clung to his clothes, and his face was stiff, cold. When he looked at me, something in his eyes made me freeze. "Where were you today?" The question was laced with poison. "At the store, buying a few things." He tossed his keys on the table and let out a short, dry laugh. Liar. Before I could respond, he threw a glass against the wall. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room. My whole body shook. He had never come this close to physical violence before. "You think you can fool me, Emily?" He stepped forward. I stepped back. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. At that moment, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to get out. I ran to the bedroom and locked the door. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and typed a message to Melissa. "I need to leave." "Now he's getting aggressive." She replied within seconds, "I'm on my way." But Brandon banged on the door, hard. "Emily, open this door!" My time was running out. With the bag I had hidden under the bed in my hands, I tried to think of an escape route. The sound of the key turning in the lock sent me into a panic. He had a copy. I was trapped. But then I heard a noise outside. A loud knock at the front door. A voice. "Brandon, open this door." It was my dad. My heart stopped for a second. I never imagined he would come without me calling him. For years, he had tried to warn me, tried to make me see the truth. And now, he was here, pounding on the door like a shield between me and the monster who had been holding me captive. Brandon hesitated. His expression flickered between rage and uncertainty. "This has nothing to do with you. Get out of here." My dad didn't move. "If you don't open this door right now, I'll break it down, and I guarantee you won't like the consequences." I knew, in that moment, that I had a chance. I grabbed my bag and made the decision I had been putting off for so long. Brandon was still distracted, uncertain, and I knew that if I waited even one more second, he would regain control. I ran for the bedroom door, unlocked it, and in one swift motion, slipped past him before he could grab me. When I reached my dad, I felt a crushing wave of relief. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight. "It's over, sweetheart. You're safe now." Brandon shouted something behind me, but it didn't matter anymore. I was free. The car moved down the road as I stared out the window, trying to process everything that had happened. The cool night air felt different, lighter, as if I could finally breathe after so long. Beside me, my father gripped the steering wheel firmly, but his eyes, always strong, now carried something I hadn't seen in years: relief. When we arrived at my parents' house, my mother ran to embrace me. I collapsed in her arms. She whispered that everything was okay, that I was safe. But what stayed with me the most was my father's voice, firm and resolute. "I will never let him lay a hand on you again, sweetheart. Never again." In the days that followed, I slowly started to recover. My father, always reserved, sat with me on the porch one evening. We stayed in silence for a while, just listening to the crickets in the background. Then he sighed and broke the quiet. "I missed you, Em. Ever since you married him, I saw you drifting away. But not because you wanted to. He took you from us, and I let it happen." I swallowed hard. "It wasn't your fault, Dad. I let myself be fooled. I believed his lies. He placed his hand over mine. That's different now. You're here, and we're going to make things right. A few days later, Brandon showed up at my parents' house looking for me. He stared my father down, arrogant as always, and said he shouldn't interfere in matters between a husband and wife. But my father didn't back down. He stepped forward, meeting Brandon's gaze with the steadiness of a man who knew exactly what he was protecting. Husband and wife? A man who destroys the woman he claims to love doesn't deserve to be called a husband. You're nothing but a coward, and I will never let my daughter suffer at your hands again. Now leave before I make you leave myself. Brandon hesitated. I saw fear in his eyes. He turned and left without looking back. I watched everything from the window, my heart pounding. But it wasn't fear I felt anymore. It was relief. I was safe. Brandon thought he could break me. He thought I would disappear from his life like a ghost, scared and humiliated. But he forgot who I was before he reduced me to nothing. With Melissa's help, I gathered all the evidence: manipulative messages, suspicious bank transfers, recorded conversations. Every word, every veiled threat he had used against me was now a weapon in my hands. He wanted to erase me, but I was about to make sure everyone saw him for who he really was. The first blow came with the official report. Brandon was called in for questioning about his suspicious financial activity. The man who thought he was untouchable was now under investigation. His once respected name started circulating through the company corridors as someone on the verge of downfall. But I didn't just want his professional ruin. I wanted him to taste the bitter humiliation he had forced me to swallow for so long. One night, I did something he would never have imagined. I found a journalist willing to publish my story. Without fear, I told everything. The manipulative, abusive man who hid behind a perfect suit. The article spread like wildfire. And then, to complete my final move, I called him myself. Brandon. My voice was cold, sharp. Did you enjoy seeing your name in the headlines? Did you like the feeling of being exposed? Because now everyone knows who you really are. The silence on the other end was proof that I had won. You ruined everything, he exploded, his voice filled with rage. You can't do this to me. I smiled, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. I only did to you what you did to me, except, unlike you, I didn't have to lie. The truth was enough to bury you. And now, Brandon, you're just a man without power, without respect, without anything. Exactly how you wanted to see me. I hung up, and in that instant, I knew. I was free. The weeks passed, and little by little, I started rebuilding my life. I went back to work, regained my independence, and most importantly, reclaimed myself. For the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and saw Emily, not the shadow Brandon had created. One sunny morning, my father called me outside to help him in the garden. As he dug into the soil, he looked at me and smiled. You know, Em, this garden had been abandoned for years, but now we're bringing it back to life. I smiled back. Yes, we were. I was. Because finally I was free.